Good afternoon, and thank you very much everyone for joining us today. My name is Louise Smith and I'm the People and Transformation Director at Chidley, Scotland. I'm very fortunate to be joined today by a fantastic panel of business and academic experts, and we're going to discuss the very hot topic of how we reinvent global supply chains and business models. Just before we get into discussions, I'd like to invite each of the panel members to introduce themselves and maybe share their top 2 or 3 areas of particular interest or expertise on today's session topic. So if I start off with you, Jo, because on my screen, you're right.
Hi everyone, and thanks very much for inviting me here today, and it's been great to network already. My name is Jo Chidley. I'm the co-founder of Beauty Kitchen and Return Refill Repeat. We are an indie beauty brand, but the reason for that brand is to drive change within our industry through a reusable packaging programme that's available to the industry. I would say my expertise is probably entrepreneurial spirit alongside change management. If we want to get technical, cradle to cradle design and B Corp certification is high on my list. And if I popcorn over to Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert Graham from Graham's The Family Dairy. It's a business started 82 years ago by my grandfather, milking 12 cows and delivering milk in the village of Bridge of Allen. It's changed a bit since then. We have 3 dairy sites in Scotland, Bridge of Allen, Fife and Nairn, and making quite a wide range of dairy products. All the retailers, we supply them across both Scotland and the UK. But in many ways, the core values of the business my grandfather started are very similar. We're still farmers ourselves. How we deal with people we work with, the 650 people in the business, and the supply chain is a really interesting topic. It's a really interesting topic just now. What the food supply chain in the UK does every day is really phenomenal, and many of you don't see it. And interesting, it comes at a time when it's under so much pressure, but you read about in the papers. But we do our best. We do a great job as an industry of helping feed the nation, and that's kind of what we do, and try and make sure that the consumers have got nutritious, healthy food we need every day.
Great, thanks, Robert. Shall we move on to Geoff?
Thanks very much, Louise. Good afternoon, everyone. Much appreciated for the invitation to be with you here today. It's a real pleasure. My name is Geoff Mackey. I work within a business called BASF. We're a global chemical technology business. So most people have used our products every day, one form or another, be that in beauty products, packaging, food, transport. We're kind of just about ubiquitous. From our side of things, the key conversations for us at the moment is all about people better understanding their footprints. That's carbon, water, and also part of that conversation is about then making some good choices. So you'll hear me droning on happily about carbon literacy, environmental literacy, and indeed science literacy. So people understand better how to make the decisions that we all need to make to better live a sustainable future for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Geoff. That's great. And finally to Eleanor, please.
Thanks, Louise. It's great to be here this afternoon and to know that I already use the products produced by my 3 other panel members and enjoy them very much. Jo, if we can have more anti-aging products, I'll be up for that, please. But thanks very much. So I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at Strathclyde Business School, and I'm one of the associate principals of the university, and my responsibility what I champion across the university is creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship. With respect to the topic that we're discussing today, probably I'm I've got most expertise around the business models part of what we're discussing, but what I'm really interested in is what do we need to do as leaders to help the organisations that we're guiding, that we're leading, to help the employees that we're also guiding and leading to be more values driven, more purpose driven, and how can we combine things like profit, people, planet, purpose. You know, those are things that are very, very close to my heart. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have this afternoon. So thanks for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Lovely, thank you very much. What a great panel we've got. We're very fortunate. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is such a hot topic. This year, Zero Waste Scotland published a material flow account and revealed for the first time that 4/5 of Scotland's footprint comes from the products that and materials that we manufacture, use and throw away, and 4/5 represents 80% of Scotland's footprint. So this is a big, big number. And of that 80%, 50% are emissions from products which are produced overseas, which we import. And that's typically importing from poorer and more polluting countries than Scotland. So, you know, so there's a bit about consuming less, but doing more locally and sustainably. And I think really we need politicians, policymakers, governments, businesses and individuals to all make a change. This isn't a one-trick pony. Society appears to largely be conditioned to consumerism, and many businesses seem to be conditioned to maximising profits for their shareholders. Our resources are running out, and our mass consumption is literally costing the earth. And so we really need to think about how we reinvent our global supply chain and business models. I think we can start to see that we've begun to make the transition from corporate social responsibility to environmental social governance. You know, certainly my early career was when CSR started to become a really hot topic, and I was working at that time for organisations like Coca-Cola, IKEA, Amazon, and you know, CSR was really important, but the dial definitely seems to be moving into the ESG space. And to pick up on something that Eleanor had mentioned, how do we get leaders really signed up and committed to this? You know, particularly senior leaders. So, you know, our current generations of C-suite leaders, you know, grew up at a time where we didn't really have circular economy, sustainability, climate change as part of the academic curriculum back then. You know, we might have, some of us, you know, attended university and been on courses that were quite specific to that, but most of the core curriculum wasn't focused around that, and the dial seems to have shifted already for the next generations coming through. But what do we do just now, and do the current organisations understand ESG and the benefits? So around the leadership piece, can I pass over please first to Eleanor and then maybe on to Geoff, just around your experience and your thoughts on how we get our senior leaders understanding and bought into this. Eleanor?
Yes, thanks Louise. Sorry, I was having a problem unmuting myself there, which is not something anyone in my family would ever say much often about me, but there you go. Okay, what the research tells us is that, you know, most leaders are aware of the environment, have an understanding that their business, their organisation has an impact on the environment, and they're keen to do something about it. What they do, how they go about it, and how they contribute on that journey to net zero, there's much less clarity about. So I think there's a space here for a space for education to help guide leaders and their organisations on that journey to becoming a cleaner, fairer, inclusive organisation. But I also think, and this is why it's great we've got the other panellists on here, we need more ambassadors and more role models who are running really successful companies, and when I use the word successful, I use it in the broadest of terms. I'm certainly not using it solely in financial terms, although that is important. So let's, we're not naive about that. That is absolutely important. So I think we need to help our leaders understand that there isn't a trade-off between profit and planet. And actually, if we commit to doing better by our planet, it's much more likely that we're going to create more sustainable business models that consumers are going to be attracted to, because they really value the purpose of that organisation. They think the products are great, and they understand the contribution that by working with, buying products from that sort of organisation that does combine purpose, planet, people, profit, that they are contributing. So in a way, we really need to educate that it's not a trade-off, but then I think we need to provide some real practical advice about how do you audit what your environmental footprint looks like, and what measures can you then take over time to reduce that. So role for education, role for great role models and ambassadors for really for explaining that there's no need to have that trade-off, that sustainability expects those to be hand in hand in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Eleanor. And over to you. There was a couple of points I wanted to pick up, but I'm interested to hear from Geoff first, and then we can maybe start to get into some more of the detail.
There was a lovely couple of thoughts there from Eleanor to start us off. Let's take the role model piece to start with, because that's great. Number one of my role models in sustainability was my grandfather. My grandfather was a country postmaster in South Armagh, and trust me, if he caught you wasting anything, you knew all about it. So there's a whole conversation about relearning what we already knew as businesses, as citizens of our businesses, towns, communities, and indeed as leaders. The question of what sustainability is, let's go back 6, 8, 10 years when I talked about sustainability and carbon, people looked at me like I was kind of odd. I've actually become almost trendy in the last 3 or 4 years. People know what I want to talk about, which is a great starting point. But Eleanor's question of education is absolutely the starting point. The reality of conversation, and this is with senior leaders and indeed our children and our parents and grandparents, is simply to get them to better understand the buying decisions they're making and the impacts of those buying decisions. That's key. And before I shut up, because by the way, you'll have noticed I can go on for a while, we as a business have been going for 160 years. And one of the things we do is my colleagues who are engineers talk about efficiency. We would talk about sustainability. And there's another part of the conversation about language. We can all make better choices. Education is the key across the piece.
Great, thank you both. And that point about education, how readily available do you think it is, and how comfortable do you think senior leaders are about saying, I don't get this? Is it easier to hire someone who's your sustainability director and pass it over to them? So recently I've completed my professional certification in climate solutions with the Royal Scottish Geographical Society. And that's targeted at senior leaders in organisations to kind of say, this is the biggest issue of our time, and we need to do something, and you need to have this embedded right in within your strategy. But do you think this is readily available out there? The education is readily available out there, and do you think that senior leaders are up for it?
So I think there's some great educational offerings, like the one that you've mentioned, Louise. Absolutely fantastic. But we need more. There's not going to be a silver bullet, and there's also not going to be one size fits all. So if we're going to make this sort of education and awareness raising available, we've got to do it through multiple channels in lots of different ways, because we want to be able to reach as many people as possible. And I think the other thing we've got to be really, really careful of is not preaching to people and telling them what they need to do, because people really don't like that. I think we've got to have a much more inspiring, positive message that really gets people excited and motivated about the journey towards net zero, and to really questioning as consumers the consumption choices. And I agree with what Geoff's saying there. Is my kids, kids are brilliant because they are very, very up on this, and they will not buy particular products because of what they contain, or have they been tested on animals, or whatever it might be. But so we can learn a lot from our young people, and maybe that'd be a great starting point, actually, that we get kids to educate some of us. But I think we need multiple routes to education, multiple ways of spreading that message, and doing it in such a positive, inspirational way that it really encourages a movement of people who want to work together to achieve this, because they know it's the number one issue that we need to look at today, and that if we work together to collaborate on it, we're much more likely to meet the targets that have been set than trying to do it in a very individual manner. And that's where supply chains can really help with that, because you have got lots of organisations working together. So it is a great place for any business to look to try to address ways in which it can become much more sustainable.
Louise, I'm not going to disagree with Eleanor, but I'd like to go back to your original question as well. You talked about getting leaders comfortable. Actually, I would suggest that without preaching at anybody, part of the game is to make sure they're damned uncomfortable, because the short answer is it's not acceptable where we are. We cannot keep doing this. I don't care whose figures you take, and we can argue about pedantics. It is not sustainable to do things the way we as a society have chosen to do them during our generation. And that's a big full stop statement. Therefore, the answer is we need to catch ourselves on here and actually take steps. And again, my starting point would be, as people understand the decisions they're making, they can make more sustainable decisions, because what is sustainability to each of us is different. Joe, Robert, Eleanor, myself, we all see it through slightly different eyes. But the important thing is we all take steps to be more sustainable in everything we do.
Great, thank you very much. And that's a really nice link into Robert and Joe. So here are two leaders who have embraced this. How have you educated yourselves, or been educated in this space? And what are your consumers telling you? Are you seeing this generational divide? Are you starting to see a shift in consumer demand for sustainability? So, starting off with yourselves, you're great examples of this. So what's made you great examples of this? How have you educated yourselves, and what are you seeing from your consumers, please? So I don't know who wants to go first. I think, Robert, you're off mute, so we'll start with you if that's all.
Well, Geoff's point about efficiency and sustainability being really the same thing to some degree is really well made. A lot of what we're talking about is just it's just good business. We see we're in the food business. We have food in people's tables, and we look at what as a full population, what consumers are saying around food. The top two things still are taste and price, not necessarily in that order. Those are still the top two things, and obviously sustainability is moving up the agenda. However, around our business, talking about my grandfather and his core values of 82 years ago, we're a Scottish business. Our supply chain is for milk is all Scottish. The majority of our packaging is all Scottish. So we're very Scottish and UK central from our supply chain. But around that, we have provenance and authenticity, and also trust. And for me, that is about taking, and we don't get every decision right. No business person gets every decision. Nobody gets every decision right. But it's about trying to take the right decisions around around this, whether it's to do with packaging or heat. And we're in an industry which has used a lot of heat, used a lot of transport. We have the UK supply chain has food moving everywhere. It just has to. So we have a lot of things moving around, and it requires big decisions, lots of small things, and change of practice also requires big investments. But there's a lot of exciting opportunities, certainly as we look at what we're looking at as a business.
Great, thanks, Robert. And how have you educated yourself in this? You know, how have you built your understanding of sustainability and circular economy, and you know, how are you where you are now? Is it good responsible human behaviour? You talked about good business, but is there some good responsible human behaviour that kind of comes from your grandfather?
Yeah, well, I think so. There's a lot of having to educate yourself if you're looking at anaerobic digesters for turning, with support of LCITPs, turning waste, whey and slurry into replacing gas at one of our dairies. As just an example, there's a lot of knowledge one has to take in that is different to how do we make great butter. You know, it's different, and that's one example of things that we look at, and because they're big capex decisions and the right decisions, we have to understand them ourselves, whether it's that or whether it's to do with what happens when we increase the recycled milk bottle content in our milk bottles. You know, it's all these things that we have to understand them ourselves. So yeah, it has been a learning journey, and it's been a lot of time taken up, big and small projects. So, but it's been really interesting. I think I understand some of it.
Thank you very much, Robert. And over to you, Jo, who's going to get us the anti-aging products.
So coming back to Geoff's point, really, and Robert kind of touched on that, we're all sustainability nerds. That's what you just call yourself now, yeah? Okay. And with regards to the education piece, for me, so I'm a chemist, so I generally have a strong curiosity about how things fit together. Even if I don't technically understand everything, I'm also a big reader. And, you know, for me, it just makes business sense. The triple bottom line, where it's people, planet, profit, I don't see, it just doesn't work in my brain. I'm going to take resources, I'm going to make something, and then I'll sell it to somebody, and then I've got nothing else to do with it. And some of those are then resources that could then be used again. That just doesn't make sense to me. So when we set up our business, we looked at it from a circular model. Now, the circular economy is a great marketing term, but circular economy has been around forever. Yeah, it's just the way that people access it and how do they use it. And that comes back to the first point about how do you engage with leaders. So we're a small indie business. We've only been trading since 2014. Our turnover is less than 3 million. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we're growing and, you know, we are getting to places. But the big key for us is targeting our sustainable impact. Whether we get to net zero quicker than anyone else is still tiny in the grand scheme of things. Where we can make the biggest impact is by generating that engagement, enthusiasm and energy with big companies. And we do that through our reusable packaging system. So our first customer was Beauty Kitchen, obviously. Our second customer was Unilever. Now, they're the third biggest personal care company in the world. They're also big in food and other areas, yeah? And if they changed their packaging from single-use packaging, whether it can be recycled or whatever, to reusable packaging, what a difference just one company could make in a sustainability dial. Yeah, and that's really what we try to do. We try to pioneer change by demonstrating what's possible. So we've gone through the pain through our own brand of how do you reuse packaging? How do you engage with consumers? How do you build the infrastructure that sits behind that? And the reason why we've done it that way is that we wanted to reduce all of the barriers to entry. So we, coming back to probably Geoff's point as well, in terms of the excuses that big companies make, oh, we can't do it because it doesn't work, or it's not scalable, it's not commercially viable, all of the linear approaches to business. So what we've done is we have reduced all of that so that there's really nowhere for the leaders of big businesses to go when they engage with us from a reusable packaging system. And the other thing is, when you're dealing with a linear economy, you have to talk in linear terms, because unfortunately, we're all sustainability nerds, or we've got an interest in it. What we need to do is target those people and businesses that it isn't even on their radar. That's the key to the big change. And I've got some data here. Yeah, 98% of consumers want to buy more sustainable products. 88% of consumers expect brands and retailers to help them live more sustainably. 88% of consumers want to buy refillable products. 92% of consumers will switch brands for refillable, reusable packaging. 74% of consumers would pay more for sustainable packaging, and 63% of consumers would switch retailers. This data didn't come from Beauty Kitchen. This came from Kantar through Unilever and Asda. Yeah, so, you know, I think when you're dealing with linear businesses, talking in their terms to say your marketing spend can help you become more sustainable because it's going to get you a better choice of, and I don't even want to use the word customer or consumer. I think we now need to talk in terms of citizens. We're all responsible in some way for making the place more sustainable. And if we don't all get on the journey, we need to, I really don't know what is going to happen. So just a couple of stats from the beauty industry. 190 billion pieces of single-use packaging is produced every year, just for personal care, guys. You know, that's not even all of the FMCG consumer products, and something has got to change. And we're reusing less than we ever did before. But coming back to, everyone's touched on this, if we think of what happened maybe 40 years ago, maybe not even 40 years ago, 10 years ago, before we started to really push recycling, reuse was what we did. And, you know, it is about falling back in love with, you know, reuse. So one of the ways that we are trying to do this at Beauty Kitchen is having, you know, our reusable bottle. And what, wouldn't it be great? It's got a data code, QR code on it. You know the full life of that journey of that bottle from the moment it was manufactured until it was reused and refilled. What if it sat in Leonardo DiCaprio's bathroom and you had his bottle? You know, there's marketing stories that can come to help us create that engagement and energy for the people that just are not interested in sustainability.
Great, thank you very much, Jo. Some great stats in there that suggests that it's the wider group of consumers and not just younger generations now that are demanding the change. You know, there's definitely been a shift, and undoubtedly the pandemic has started to change some of society's views. You know, the demand for knowledge, expertise, understanding in this space, you know, seen through Brexit as well. You know, the supply chains were all impacted and are still being impacted. So people are having to start to do things differently, but they're also thinking more about what they're doing. You know, when there were food shortages or potential food shortages and people couldn't get deliveries to their home, they were much more careful about using up what was in their fridges. You know, so there has been a shift in society, and I think there is a bit about, you know, you touched on there, you know, people not seeing the value that's created by doing things in the right way, and you know, and thinking quite traditionally about things. But, you know, I think what we need to keep in mind is, you know, top line growth. You know, you're attracting customers who, as you're saying, have got this demand for sustainability. There's cost reductions when organisations start to think more about what they're doing in terms of their energy costs and staff expense costs, you know, for corporate travel and things like that. You know, if organisations are doing things right, they've got much more opportunity for government intervention. So whether that's about subsidies or grants, that starts to become available, and there's a productivity uplift, you know, so actually your ability to attract and retain talent because of your social credibility, you know, gives you a USP. And then, you know, Robert, you were talking about, buying new kit and the CapEx decisions. Actually, if you're making decisions that are about asset optimization, you're thinking about what's going to be there for the long haul for you, and you're making the right asset decisions. So just kind of thinking about them. So there's some of the benefits. I guess just on that, what benefits are any of the panel members seeing as a result of adopting circular strategies in their organisations?
Well, immediately I know that when we went into COVID, so the majority for Beauty Kitchens products, unfortunately at the time when we went into COVID, 90% of our sales came from bricks and mortar retailers. Yeah. And we were in the process of mitigating that risk between e-commerce, e-tailers and bricks and mortar retailers, but we hadn't put that strategy fully in place. But we were forced to do that through COVID. But what's happened is that we haven't had the growth with those bricks and mortar retailers that we projected for those nearly 2 years now. But our profitability is we're a little bit shocked by how good the numbers actually are. And that's just, for me, proves that, it was the right thing to do it in a more circular fashion.
Great, thank you. What about any of our other panel members seeing the benefits of this?
I suppose the answer to some of what we're talking about is thought. I mean, we've talked about investment, but actually it's about design. It's about making things so they can be reused, they can be recycled, and part of that comes right back to making sure things are right. Now, Robert touched on trust, and that's another part of this conversation, because actually people have got to trust business to deliver the frame that our political friends give us, because with all deference to the average politician, they can deliver the right frame and the stability for growth that many of us need as business. But the choices that people make regarding travel or what they eat, how they eat, for me, there are some very, very simple conversations here. Number one, eat seasonal. I'm not even going to get into the conversation about food miles. You can't build things based on continual growth. There's another conversation. And so from my side of things, and I look at Eleanor happily nodding, I mean, these are conversations we should be having with anyone, because it's about systems answers. It's not about building like an insect colony that's just going to explode eventually. Is it, Eleanor?
Geoff, I do, as you can tell, completely agree with you. It's a whole systems approach that we need to take. And this is where I really believe in, if we take the model of an ecosystem, and if we borrow from biology, then that teaches us so much. Not only does it teach us about sustainability, it also teaches us about how we can, need and should work with one another. So I think having this sort of, to me, a circular economy is like an ecosystem that your supply chains, your business models work together to meet the shared objectives of, I'll say it again, profit, planet, people and purpose. And I think that ecosystem metaphor is a really good one. As far as my own area of work goes, the biggest difference for us has been, we've been working from home, for almost 18 months now. And I used to think, as many of us did, I need to fly down to London, spend 4 hours in London, fly back home. And let me tell you, the thought of doing that now just fills me with, really? And what does it make me question? It makes me question not only the impact I'm having on the environment, but my own health and well-being, and the time I'm spending with my kids, the time, the time traveling that I'd be much more productive, I'd be much happier doing something else. But the other thing, as an academic institution, the global experts, in the way that you have, put this brilliant panel together today, we are able to say to people, regardless of where they are, could you spare 30 minutes? I know you might be in Brazil, but could you spare 30 minutes to come and speak to my students because they're really interested in what you've got to say? Brilliant, yeah, because we're all used to doing that now, whereas before that would always be unthinkable. So Geoff spoke about thinking. I think it's about mindset and shifting mindsets as well, that there's just different ways of doing things. And I think what COVID has done is it's forced us to experiment, and it's been a learning journey. You know, lots of COVID's, of course, been really devastating, but there have been advantages because we've had to experiment, we've had to learn, and I actually think for the environment, it's probably been a good thing because it's made us pause and question what it is that we're doing. And I have to say, I need to apologise, I'm moving about. Can you believe in the south side of Glasgow, it's as sunny as this afternoon, and so I'm trying to, that's why I keep moving about in a crazy fashion. Okay, it's not that I've got an itchy back or anything, it's just really sunny. So that's what I think Geoff and I are in violent agreement on lots of different things here.
As a brief aside, there wasn't many people within our business working from home over the last year and a half. The cows still needed milk, products still need made, trucks need to get out to customers, supermarkets, and it's quite a divergence between businesses that were able to fully work from home and businesses that absolutely had to keep going, whether it was a business or an organisation. But in our regard, a food business, like many food businesses, all food businesses had to keep going, otherwise the shelves would have been empty. But Geoff talked about food miles, and as a Scottish business, and the demand for more provenance and Scottish products is something we've continued to see through the last year. Rather pick up a Scottish block of butter than a Danish one. Interesting to see how many people have got Danish butter in their fridge. But we've also restocked. We launched milk in glass bottles about 2 years ago. We launched a home delivery operation that's similar to what Joe was talking about with direct to consumer last spring, mainly in the north of Scotland. And that did really well, grew about tenfold in fairly short order, and has been a nice additional piece of our business. So doing more like that. We're launching milk in paper, well, cartons, in a matter of weeks, probably later this month, I think it is. So that'll be interesting to see the consumer take up on that non-fossil plastic cap on it. So it's been an interesting year, but a lot of what we have also planned is really for the next 12 months, some quite big capex projects around about anaerobic digesting and heat recovery and so on. So it's really interesting and exciting, and hopefully I've understood it all and hope what we're doing is all correct.
Great, thank you. I mean, that's a really interesting point, because I think that's where Geoff started originally when he was talking about, basically, being able to do the assessment, the calculation of the impact, and it's very hard. We talked there about not going down to London or not going over to Germany for a meeting and doing it virtually. And obviously we've got COP26 and people flying from all over the world, but actually the physical interactions and the number of people that can be met in that situation, does it net itself off? Do you then get the benefit on the back of it? Is an interesting question, and some of this can be very difficult to measure and assess at times. We've got 6 minutes left, and so I would like to just ask each of you in the last 6 minutes, what do you think is the biggest barrier to making the supply chain more transparent and to reducing consumption and driving the circular economy? What do you think the biggest barrier is?
So I just wanted to build on Robert's point, because, everything that Graham's are doing, there's risk attached to it. If you're doing something that's different than before, there's risk attached to it. And that is a big challenge for any business. whatever size you actually are. And it really fits into, the question that you've asked with regards to supply chain. The challenge that we have at the moment is that all of the economics across the world are set up for linear businesses. So if you try to attempt anything in a circular fashion, everything is against you. Now, I don't want to be doom and gloom, because that's not, as you can tell, it's not my style to be like that. But it doesn't bode well for driving change and innovation if everything is the rules of the game are set up differently from the way that you wish they were set up. And that's where the true collaboration between, academics, between policymakers, businesses and citizens is key to all of these discussions. And access to finance, for me personally.
Yeah.
I also think, Louise, there's a conversation in there about how we measure value. I mean, the reality of the conversation, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, but hey, there you go. There's a real conversation that if we have enough, if our businesses are growing at 2-3%, then perhaps we should think about other ways to measure the value, rather than saying we want a business to grow at 5%. And part of that conversation is looking at the materials, and the innovation that is needed, and bringing in different thoughts, bringing in people that may have a view on different things and looking at things in different ways is part of that conversation. I know there's been mention of the consumer. I really don't think we should blame the consumer, because the challenge for the consumer is often they don't know the choices they're making. We have to give them the opportunity to make better choices in all sorts of ways. That's part of our challenge in business, as far as I'm concerned.
I wonder too if we had clearer ESG metrics and standards that we could invite organisations to be transparent about and hold themselves up against. And if those were valued also, so if we historically, shareholder value has been what's the most important metric, what about if we had a different metric, and a metric that did look at those ESG components of being a sustainable company, and put, as Geoff says, and put a value on that. And that I think we're on that journey. Accountants will move to that place where there will be a value put on that. But I think what we require are some really easy standards and metrics and how to for companies that allow themselves to move on that journey, to be on the journey, and then to hold themselves up against those metrics and identify how they're doing, where are they, and what can they do to do those things better. So it is a very different way of thinking about what is and what is not valuable, but we really don't have any choice. It's something that we're just going to have to accept that it's required, and it will make for more sustainable planet and more sustainable businesses.
Thanks, Eleanor. Robert?
I think most people in business would agree that if you keep doing it the same way, in 20 years you'll not be in business. And if I did the same way as my grandfather did it, and if my dad did it the same way as my grandfather did it, we wouldn't be here. And this is particularly a case, and there is risk involved as a business in terms of making some of these changes. There is a risk, but it is a part about businesses need to always keep evolving. I mean, there is having to take a lot of knowledge. It's quite intellectually interesting working through a lot of these projects. But if we keep doing it the same way, we're a family business, and we want to keep doing having great products for customers who trust us, and that trust is really important. So,
and we need a planet for your customers to be existing. So we need to save that precious planet. So I think when we talked about the risks, we talked about a lack of collaboration. We talked, or sorry, the blockages. We talked about a lack of collaboration, potential risks in businesses being potentially risk averse. We talked about traditional thinking versus diversity of thought or innovation, and trust, and being able to measure value and measure ESG. So that's probably our homework for today, to go and work out how we take those blockages and resolve them. So thank you very much, everyone, for your really valuable contribution. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today and have you all participate and involve, and really insightful. So thank you.